All right, good morning or afternoon, and welcome to the 9th edition of Sesamers on Tour. Our team at Startup Sesame is so thrilled to be bringing you new, unique content every week from our global tech event network. Since April, we have been making our way around the globe every single Tuesday. If you want to know more about the tour and sign up for updates, head over to tour.sesamers.com. Today is our 9th stop, and we're not just covering one country, but one region, the Nordics. Thank you so much to our Nordic-made partners, TechBBQ, Gothenburg Tech Week, Oslo Innovation Week, Iceland Innovation Week, and Arctic15. And now I'm passing it off to Elina, co-organizer of Gothenburg Tech Week, to begin the session.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. And welcome to the Nordics. The 9th edition of Sesamers Tour has landed here, and today's event is a collaboration, and we are super happy to welcome you to this part of the world. Our topic for today is VC funding in climate tech, and with me today I have 3 entrepreneurs working themselves in this industry and 2 investors in this field. So why this subject? In the Nordics, we have seen access to funding in early stage clean tech companies are rather small. At the same time, a vast majority of the impact startups that are enrolling in the sector are in climate tech. And it's also a field that usually requires a lot of capital to research and development to even be able to reach a commercialization phase. Unlike other tech companies, this is usually a field with both software and intricate hardware solutions and has a longer runway to customers. The tricky part with R&D heavy IDs are also the challenge with scaling. Going from a laboratory up and running operation with a full scale production can be long, tedious, and sometimes not really financially viable. So no doubt that the transformation into a more sustainable world will require massive funding. I read somewhere like $1 trillion a year will be needed in the sector per year to achieve what we want. At the same time, these companies need to overcome somewhere like 4 values of death of capital before reaching commercialization. On the other hand, there are great opportunities in this field. Making the technology work and finding a sustainable business model to it enables a great chance for a great venture, and the world will be saved. We'll discuss the possibilities and challenges within this field relating to funding or these world-saving ideas. And I will do my best to squeeze out experiences and learnings, thoughts and inspiration out of a great panel today, and we will try to end this within an hour. Depending on which platform you're on, you're able to ask questions to the panel. And just add them into the comment section, and we'll try to incorporate that in our conversation. I think it's time for us to get started. Again, a warm welcome to the audience and a huge thank you to the Sesamers having us on. My name is Elina Åkerlind, and I will be moderating this conversation. As Tara said, I am one of the organizers of Gothenburg Tech Week and also work with business development for early stage companies looking for investments and road mapping the way to venture capital and beyond. I have a background both with funding startups and scale-ups and had one turn on the dark side, enrolling in a startup myself. That was me, and we'll head over to the panelists. I'll let you introduce yourselves one by one. First up, Henrietta Moon, co-founder and CEO of Carboculture. Please give us your intro.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Elina. Thanks, Sesamers and Nordic-made crew. Great to have a pan-Nordic collaboration and excited to talk about climate tech. I'm Henrietta Moon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Carboculture. And at Carboculture, we draw down carbon and sequester it safely for 1,000 years. And how we do that is by converting biomass waste into high purity carbons that stay stable and out of the atmosphere for a very long time. We're about 10 people. We're based remotely, but we have our R&D facility, which is in California in the Central Valley. And there we have about 4 people working full time now in making our carbons, and we're a Finnish headquartered company, hence the Nordic connection. Yeah, great to be here.
And thank you so much, Henrietta, and we're happy to have you on board. We'll move on to Arman Kojic. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No worries.
Founder and CEO of Nanum. Welcome up.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually Icelandic, and I have an interesting surname because my grandfather immigrated to Iceland, of all places. The company that I started is called Nano, and our purpose is hidden in our name because Nano and Om. Om is the old Indian symbol for the world, the universe, truth, and everything, and we use nanotechnology to impact the world. We believe that true change comes from within products, from within ourselves, and when you take something like advanced nanoparticles, you can all of a sudden be making a battery last 10 times longer, or not have the same impact on the environment, or reduce the cost. And my journey has sort of been both in Iceland and Silicon Valley, because I've lived in both places, and we ended up taking investment from the US. And we're working on that vision where you can drive your electric car across Europe on a single charge, or not have to charge your phone for a month. And that sort of change happens from within by using these unique materials and processes. So yeah, I'm very excited to chat about this topic. It's very near and dear to me, and it's going to be fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and great to have you here as well. Cecilia Linhard, you're the CFO of Otovo. Who are you?
Hi, so yeah, very happy to be part of the panel. Actually, I joined Otovo about a year ago and was the CFO until March, and now I'm leading the leasing entity that we spun out of Otovo last year. I previously have background from private equity, a growth fund called Verdane, focusing on tech-enabled growth companies in Northern Europe. I guess Otovo is a company that was founded in Norway in 2016, and it's our main aim is to be the easiest and most convenient way for customers and homeowners to get solar panels on their roofs. Which is quite interesting because there's not that much sun in Norway, and labor costs are quite high. So the business case for residential solar in Norway is not the best in the world, but that made us also find digital solutions and this platform model that we have to drive down the cost to the end consumer. So basically a customer can go online to our website and otovo.no.se in Sweden and so forth, enter their address, and then get an instant offer for a residential solar installation. And on the back end of that, we have a network of installers across Europe that bid for these projects. And when there are multiple bids for one address, magic happens and prices come down. So that's basically what we are trying to achieve. And we're present in Norway, Sweden, in Spain, France, Italy, and Poland as of recent.
Thank you for joining us today. That was our awesome entrepreneurs, and we're moving on to our investors. Stefan Karlsson, you're the CEO of the Klimatet Invest. Please share your story.
Yes, hello everyone. Great to be here. I have a long background in renewable energy. First of all, I worked for the international group SKF as the global head for renewable energy for many years. The last 6 years I've been independent, primarily supporting entrepreneur companies, startups within renewables. And 1 year ago, I joined forces with a number of other people with vast experience from the industry to form a relatively new venture capital investor, Klimatet Invest, where our business idea is to come in relatively early and invest both with equity and management support into companies that have smart ideas supporting the change of the climate change here. So far, this is company 1 year old. So far, we made 3 investments. Our portfolio is with Liquid Wind, who use renewable energy as a base in electrolyzing green hydrogen, and combining that with bio CO2, basically the waste from bioprocessing industries, in order to manufacture e-methanol to replace diesel primarily in the shipping industry. We're also invested in Modbion, who has a brilliant new technology for replacing steel with wood for wind turbine towers, as well as Ligna Energy, who is a recent startup using lignin and carbon from wood in order to replace the traditional batteries. So these are some good examples of the type of industries we're investing in, and we're looking forward for more.
Thank you, Stefan, and for taking your time. And lastly, we have Kypros Dajotas, investor at Byfounders. Please take the screen.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Kypros, originally from Lithuania, but currently based in Copenhagen at Byfounders. I'm part of the investment team, and I specialize in deep tech, and I've spent a long time looking into climate tech. Byfounders is a community-powered VC of the new Nordics, so we invest in the Nordics and Baltics as well. And when I say community-powered is because we have a Byfounders collective, which consists of more than 70 of the most prolific unicorn founders, entrepreneurs, and operators from the region that help us to source different investments and support those companies later on. Our current portfolio is more than 30 companies, and we are very much looking into becoming more active in the impact space, and in particular, climate tech. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kypros. And thank you, all of you guys, for introducing yourself. I think that we could kick off our discussion together. I'm just going to make sure that we all are visible. So the million-dollar question, is it hard to fund companies in climate tech? And I actually get to start with you, Kypros, on the investor side. What do you think about this?
I think it's becoming easier and easier. Like if you look in the past 5 years, the interest in climate tech has increased many times. There are now 12 times more funding in climate tech than there was before 5 years ago. And I think there's massive interest in the sector. I think before it may have been hard, but today it isn't so much, especially with all the driving forces behind ESG investing, impact. I think it will only skyrocket over time.
Mm-hmm. Henrietta, from the entrepreneur side, how have you been funded so far? And I mean, looking ahead, is it becoming easier, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we had a lot of actually LPs of VCs who wanted to get into climate investing, but VCs weren't doing anything. So they were investing directly into companies like ours instead of through VCs, through family funds, and through their private wealth. So we had some angels on board and some very, very early stage VCs. And just recently, we closed a round of 6.2 million with True Ventures from the US and Cherry VC from Germany and Uber Morgan from Switzerland, and a bunch of really, really, really good people. And I have to say that the VC model is still, for most VCs, it is still difficult. So it depends how you call climate tech. Are we talking about hardware, asset-heavy climate technology that takes a lot of upfront investment and has a lot of technical risk in the beginning, or are we talking about optimization software for weather data? Because those are two different categories entirely. And perhaps in the first one, there's been a lot of people have suddenly started calling themselves climate investors, and I was thrilled to be seeing so many VCs pop up. Just in the last year, there must have been 10 climate VCs that have come on board, but how many of them are willing to go beyond what's comfortable and kind of known, as in repeatable software models that are B2B sold to actual hardware that can remove carbon or reduce carbon or make greener energy or something more concrete. It's a big challenge, but the good news is we need everything. So the whole momentum that's been happening is really welcome. And like I said, I think there's more that's happened within 1 year than has happened in the past 6 years entirely. So there's a lot of positive momentum, and Kypros was right about that there's all sorts of people who want to get into this investment and are just looking for ways to do that properly, because listed companies or ESG funds are also not exactly climate technology funds. So yeah, interesting.
Thank you. Arman, I know you have some quite notably investors in your portfolio or in your how have your investment journey been going so far?
Yeah, it's never a dull moment to go through the investment process, and I think, you know, one investor just said, if you the best way to be invested in is to be in an investable company, and the climate around us for climate startups has kind of changed a little bit now, and people are both doing purpose-driven investments, but also seeing that technology like this can make money, which kind of aligns everything. We started off in an interesting way. We got in some angels. We got in a very good fund called Village Global, which has Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos on board, etc. And that was kind of important for us to have somebody on board that is people that are known for putting money into technologies that can change the world. But, you know, fundraising for hardware is always a lot of work, or for kind of a mission-driven company. And we almost had to start the company too early, and the environment sort of caught up with us. So now that we are, like, you know, getting issued patents and showing results from what our technology can do, then it seems the world has kind of caught up with us. But it's always everyone has these war stories of how they got to where they got to, and us, we're no different. We're like, you know, we've had like somebody said, as an entrepreneur, you're either in the valley of despair or the mountain of hope, and you should fundraise when you're on the mountain of hope, and stay at home when you're in the valley of despair, and get support. So yeah, it's definitely quite a journey.
It surely is. Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry, so just in context, we raised a little over $3 million, both from the EU Green Deal Fund and from various investors like Village Global, Iceland Venture Studio, etc.
So thank you. And Cecilia, I mean, you are up and running in several markets now, and you actually have a few institutional investors. So could you just give us a background on your investment journey?
Yeah, sure. I think, well, our founders started off with about I guess 100,000 euros in 2016, and made their first sort of sale in a week. So trying to you know, define or prove the concept as early as possible to get investors on board. And then we had one pre-seed seed round with the VC groups in Norway, before we moved on to and tried and attracted housing developers, utilities that had venture arms, and large institutional investors in 2018. And the last the Series C round we did in 2019 was we got a big Swedish family office, Axel Johnson, on board, which is still the largest shareholder. They have quite a clear vision and an investment mandate within solar, so they've been important also in the strategical development of the company. But I think, as Henrietta said, there are definitely different sort of categories within climate tech, and the ease of finding funding sort of varies between those categories. I think we've seen funding sort of really being more available now that you have the large companies such as Sunrun and Solar City that was sold to Tesla. And those are sort of proof of concepts that are very easy for us to point to when we are in investors discussions. And I think probably it's more difficult when you don't have those sort of unicorn stories to use as an example.
Thank you. Stefan, you, as you were mentioned, you're quite new in the investment side, and you're investing quite early, or really early. How are you thinking about the following investment rounds coming as an early investor? What are your strategies? Are you trying to follow along, or how's your strategy coming? in that?
Basically, our prime focus is to invest in technologies that contribute with a significant technical contribution to what we call beyond fossil, to bring us into the non-fossil society. The reason we can invest early is basically that we have a strong team of technically very skilled leaders in the organization to analyze both from a financial and market point of view the startups we're looking into, but also from a technology point of view. And I think the benefit we have is that we dare to go in 1 or 2 steps earlier than a normal venture capital, which is strictly looking into the numbers. By really understanding the technologies. For example, one of our partners used to be the CEO of Siemens Nordic. So, I mean, ball planking with him about technology is really, really useful. I would say that there is a large number of interesting ventures and startup in the Nordic region. We started in Sweden, but our focus is actually on the Nordic region. And we dare to go in early when we feel this is appropriate. So far, we invested in 3. I would say within a year, we probably have a portfolio of 6, 7, 8 companies. There's just a time of meeting the management, evaluating the business plan, the technology, the IP strategy, etc., and we can come to quite quick decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, Stefan, how do you find the companies? Do they find you?
Yeah, sometimes they find us, sometimes we find them. I'll give an honor to Elina and the team here. Connect is a very good intermediate for getting these contacts. We work very close with the ventures of the universities as well. For example, the Chalmers Ventures, Geo Ventures, etc., to establish these contacts. So I would say it's a search process from both sides. So far, we investigated about 60 companies.
Mm-hmm.
Out of these, we feel that roughly 15 were interesting enough to go ahead and take real meetings with the management and start drilling down in the business plan, etc. We invested in 3, but that's so far what our capital has been sufficient for. We just had an emission round, brought in more capital, and we already later this afternoon will continue our discussion with potential candidates. So out of these 15, we might end up with 6, 7, 8 or whatever, but we're still open for new contacts. Perfect. I was, for example, very, very interested in meeting Armand for the first time here and listen to his technology a couple of days ago. So we might take a closer look on Iceland as well.
Perfect. Kipras, that a question to you, actually, to add on to that. Like, I have 2 questions, actually. How industry savvy do you need to be to invest in this sector as number 1? Like, how much in-depth knowledge do you think you should need? And how do you find your climate tech investments?
I would just like to kind of bridge the 2 discussions together. So first, I'd like to say that, so like Byfounders, we primarily invest at seed and sometimes we go a bit earlier or later, like from pre-seed to Series A in that range. And the usual ticket sizes are between 2 and 4 million euros. And at that point, we really need to see some traction, usually, to make that investment decision. And ultimately, as venture capitalists, all we care about is whether this company can reach a unicorn status within 10 to 12 years, because we have limited partners in the fund and we have to return it within that time frame. So it's not like VCs kind of are allergic to hardware and they avoid it because they don't like it. I think it's more so that it's just software scales faster and it suits the life cycle of the fund better. So that's just one note that I wanted to bring in. When it comes to looking at different climate tech investments, then we evaluate a few factors. First of all, we look at how capital intensive is it to scale. Ideally, we like it to be lower. We also look at like how much of a part does software play, like I mentioned before, because again, it's faster to grow. At the same time, we evaluate the impact side of it. So for example, how much does it contribute to the greenhouse gases emissions? The life cycle food that I mentioned, and then the classic things like competitors, market size, the technology maturity level. So it's like looking at various factors, talking with the founders, and ultimately really feeling through whether they have this massive ambition to grow into something huge. And I think that when it comes to technical competency, it is important, but as venture capitalists, we usually rely more on our contacts in the industry or experts in the field that we consult with when making a decision. I think in a generalist fund, you can never really be a pro in every single vertical. It's just not feasible. But we look at more just kind of, patterns and the common qualities between different startups.
Thank you. Henrietta, a question about that. Like, how have your investors been discussing, or how have they been raising about that, like investment longevity? Because I mean, investing in you, it feels like it's a it's a longer term commitment maybe than a short fund would have. Or how have the discussions been there?
I'm like a little bit disagreeing with that, because the markets have moved so quickly. I mean, if you're thinking of public markets, they are really hungry for anything related to climate. And so I don't think that we should think about, just because a company timeline can be long, there are many routes to actually returning investor money down the line. It doesn't need to be just a sale to a larger company. There are other pathways as well. And so that's why I don't think that we should think about climate tech or hard technologies, deep technologies, as something that is non-VC fundable. I also think that the investors who invested in us are actually, how would you call it, generalist funds who don't typically do these kinds of investments. And so I guess we are part of their sort of one end of the portfolio, where they think that, okay, this is just such a massive problem that somebody is going to have to fix this problem, and therefore it's a huge global market, and it's only getting larger every day. So if VCs ask, well, how big is your market? Is it big enough for you to scale in it? Or is it big enough for you to become a billion-dollar company in it? In climate, there's absolutely no question about that, because the CO2 markets right now have grown so much. The price of CO2 has come tenfold from 2017, and there's no end in sight. So I really do think that old mantra needs to change a little bit if investors want to be in on the next kind of big wave, so to say. And of course there's trends every couple of years that emerge in VC, but climate is a big thing, and it's not going anywhere.
I would just like to add on top of it. I think we are in agreement. It's just what I was trying to say is that VCs typically prefer software because it's more familiar, but at the end of the day, all that matters is the opportunity size. And if it is large enough, then I think that any VC will compromise and adapt and go for it. So and you experience that exactly with other generalist funds. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really like, I wanted to take part in this panel so that we can kind of encourage other VCs out there who are thinking about investing into climate technologies to actually start thinking about it in a different way, because there is this wave of front runners happening right now. And if you don't get in, you will miss out. And now is a great chance to go in there, start learning, start understanding the areas, and really also understanding what needs to be done, perhaps just reading the IPCC summary to start off with, to know like, what are the physical boundaries that we actually need to get to as society? And then start thinking backwards, well, what kind of companies do we need to see in this world in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years? And then using all of that capital that has been entrusted in you to actually do something about moving the world towards that goal instead of being a bystander. And that's what I think is so awesome about VC, is that you actually have the chips to start building the world of tomorrow. And so there is a real chance to start doing something real.
Yeah, that was a nice comment. The Nordics is a really, like, we're kind of a small part of the world, both population-wise and kind of. So, and I know that all of you have international investors. To just add on to that, I mean, all of you talking about a global market, and this is something that does not only concern this part of the world or even maybe Europe. This is a global issue and a global potential for solutions and to your market. Arman, I know, I mean, you have an R&D set up in Silicon Valley, and you've been having on international investors early. Do you think that international investors is also a part of the ability to actually come to the scalable commercialization, or what do you view on that?
Yeah, I think when we choose investors, it's ideally you want a little mix of mission-driven ones, which understand your big vision of improving the world, but you want that sort of network-driven investor as well that can give you a competitive advantage. So if you need a meeting with, you know, Bill Gates or whatever, that you get that meeting and that you can sort of pick the moment to kind of elevate you to different places. You know, talking about reaching billion-dollar valuations, it can often be the difference between having the right connections to the right companies at exactly the right time. And you want investors on board that can sort of help you with that. Then it's another question when to pull those favors in. And then, of course, you want those kind of technology-driven investors as well. But and it's funny because having the US investors or the Silicon Valley investors, it was very much signaling to the others. So we had been talking to a few investors, and we sort of like were doing the dance as you do. And then as soon as Village became interested, then everybody who'd been talking to us was like, okay, we want to get in. And you know, fundraising isn't always logical because you have the same product, the same team, but it's storytelling and it's momentum and everything. So, you know, the atmosphere has changed very much for our kind of companies now because you know, I spoke to another founder who has a company in the nanotech battery space. He said we were an overnight success, but it took us 7 years, and his company is now valued at 3 billion plus. So you know, so things can happen very quickly. To find the people that believe in that vision that you're going to be the founder to get to that point, that's the dance and the dating and everything that needs to happen. So yeah.
Cecilia, I mean, you are on the stock market now and our public company. How does the investment logic has changed over the time, or how are your investors thinking now, or where you're at with that?
I think, well, we reached out to a lot of investors in the earliest rounds. I guess you have to take a few hundred meetings to meet a few good investors that believe in your vision. And then all the others, they saw our valuation going up for each round. So they sort of saw what they missed out on. And when we listed, we talked to, I think, a lot of the investors that ended up being supportive in that transaction were investors that had said no in the past, and they now saw a chance to join in. So I guess it's all about educating investors along the way. Perhaps they were dipping their toes in the climate tech world a few years ago, have now matured in what they want to do and achieve, and are ready to join in. And I think that's sort of what made the successful IPO for us.
Okay, valuation, that is like the elephant in the room, especially in early stages, and that's always up on the table for a question. Stefan, I just want to start with you. Like, as an early stage investor, how are you thinking about valuation, especially since, I mean, in early stage is also very important for both entrepreneurs and investors that the entrepreneurs or the founder and team has a big chunk left, and then you know that it will be needing a lot of capital along the way. How have you been discussing that?
It's a quite difficult issue, actually. You can go from the development side of the company and see which different TRL stages have been passed and have been successful, but you also need to consider what is the growth potential, what is the longer term business potential, the longer term supply capability, etc. And you need to basically connect these two in discussing with the founders about what is a suitable present value of the company, which of course it's a very, very rough estimate at an early stage. But I think fundamentally, if both the investor and the founders believe in the future, and when you start cooperating very closely with supporting both with equity and management support to build value, if you can basically go hand in hand and build the value, I think it's a less of a critical issue to come to a conclusion of a decent, reasonable present value.
Armand. Oh, sorry, Henrietta.
Sorry, I was just going to comment that somebody told me that the money should serve the plan, not the other way around. The plan should not be made for the money. And whatever your plan is, you need to figure out how much capital you need and then go get that capital to deploy it so you get to your goals. Of course, it's not that easy if it's really, really tough fundraising, which it was for us at some points. You're kind of like thinking about taking all sorts of silly offers, but yeah, you really need to kind of stay strong and think about what you want to achieve.
Yeah. I think Armand touched on that, getting the right type of investors as well, both the vision-driven and the network investors. I mean, what value do the investors provide to the company? I think that's an important issue as well.
Yeah, it can be night and day.
Yeah, it's not just equity, it's much more than that, if you get the right ones.
And somebody advised me very well actually on advisory boards to get kind of the big names on the advisory boards are sometimes there to give you limited time, but they give a nice fuzzy feeling to everybody else. And then you want somebody who's just willing to come and dig the ditch with you. And it's kind of the same with investors. You need a mix of kind of both worlds, because one is might be signaling or a way to go to market, and the other one might be a way to have conversations. I have conversations every week with angel investors that wrote tiny checks just because they add so much value and so much kind of knowledge in building a company and going through the journey. So it is a lot of data points you're looking at as an entrepreneur. But the key thing we sometimes don't have as entrepreneurs is leverage in the fundraising process. And if you can sort of plot out your fundraising around big events or big things that are happening, it gives the leverage kind of back. But yeah, it is a dance. And at the end of the day, you want to work with good people. And sometimes you accept lower valuations for better investors based on that the roadmap is going to bring you closer to the vision, because you're not driven by the number in the valuation. You're driven by what you're going to be doing and how to get there as quickly as possible. Our most important asset is time and attention as founders, and go to market. If you miss a window at a huge valuation, who cares? You can die a martyr, so.
Very true, very true.
I would like to just add a few more things. The first one is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had the Cleantech 1.0 kind of bubble. And I think the expectations were very inflated, valuations as well, and then all of that burst. And I think that left a bad taste in a lot of investors' mouths. And then today we're seeing those valuations picking up again. And I think it's very positive. And like Armin mentioned, if there are competing investors over the same deal, the valuation will always rise. And it's just a question of who can win the deal over, whether with resources or just financial power. But ultimately, I think that the entrepreneurs should always raise the least money they require to execute their plan. Because as soon as you start raising money just for the sake of raising it, then you get really inflated valuations. And then if you result in a down round subsequently, then that can really hurt the prospects of the company later down the line.
Great.
I'd like to say also something to the entrepreneurs listening, that sometimes the amount of money might not affect how much you have to dilute. And some funds will actually have a percentage target, that they're targeting a certain percentage in ownership. And in that case, they will just want that percentage, and you can start negotiating the percentage more than the valuation. So just to keep that in mind as well. That might be more important to the fund than the dollar number or the euro number. So as a side note here.
I just want to add to that, because I know of a company that was fundraising from Europe, and they asked for a lower amount to these big investors, and they sold a huge vision. And the investor said no, he didn't understand why they weren't raising 5 times more, and he would have invested if they were raising 5 times more, because the story didn't align with what they were taking into the gas tank to get them there. So you know, it is not always like logical and linear. So yeah. Keep us.
Yeah. We're all people, right? Keep us your 5 cents.
Sorry?
Yeah, I wanted to hear your opinion.
No, that's true. I think you have to align your plan with your expectations. Like you correctly pointed out, like if you're selling something massive, but then you're fundraising very little, and the investor can tell that you don't have sufficient runway, then it's obviously also dangerous. Ideally, you should raise enough money for the next 18 to 24 months to execute that plan. And then you want to be aggressive because you want to reach that $1 billion valuation or more. So you shouldn't sit back, but you shouldn't go crazy either. So it's like a balancing act. And what Henrietta said about the equity stake that investors target, that's definitely true. At every single stage, different investors want different ownership, and that's the thing that matters the most. And it also comes down to like pro rata rights and etc. But that's the key kind of mechanic at play. Yes.
Well, I am like, when I work with early stage companies, I'm kind of teaching that, I mean, you should do the investment tranches, that you kind of tier your investment phase. You try to raise your eyes and like say, okay, the long horizon, how much will it be? But then kind of divide them not only well for the valuation part, but also to get it kind of some sort of handling like what you're supposed to do. Is that am I right? Or what are your experiences on that? Should you like go further, or where do you put the?
Cecilia, you go first. I've been talking all the time.
No, but I was just going to comment actually on I guess what Kypros and Stefan was also said earlier, that if you have a belief in the company being like a 10x plus investment, then 10% more or less in the early stage on the valuation won't really matter, because it's going to be a great ride anyway. And I guess that's also a question for you: how sensitive, because I came from sort of a more growth capital world where we have our Excel sheets and there's a return number that needs to come out of the model, and it's like very valuation principles are very like strict, and I guess open question about whether you would be able to deviate from those valuation principles for a good climate tech case that could do to become a unicorn. But I was a bit off what Elina was trying to
I'll pause my thoughts, and then Stefan and Kypros, you could just answer to that, because I have it written. I made a note. Thank you, Stefan.
Can I add on, Elina, to your comment here with different tranches? I think also from an investor point of view, it's attractive to work in different tranches, because the very early investment are very high risk investment. The further you go in the development, you gradually reducing the risk, and you gradually reducing the potential growth opportunity. But from an investor point of view, I think it's attractive to go stepwise, basically. Do some investments, see how they develop. If it's good, you're very open for a second investment and a third investment, and you basically follow the development of the company. So I think it's good both for the entrepreneur as well as for the investor.
I think from my side, as a slightly later stage, I'd say that tranches are quite rare in general, because good startups can usually shop around for different term sheets, and if you restrict them in any way, then they will usually go to another fund. So term sheets are becoming more and more attractive these days, and tranches is one of those things that is hard to sell. When it comes to valuations and how we think about it, and the risk calculation, I think that pre-Series B, roughly, everything is but the upside. You don't really think that much like what can go wrong. It's much more about finding a really ambitious entrepreneur, a really good market, a really good technology, and just betting on it and giving them all that they require to grow fast. I think those kind of playing with the numbers and seeing all the risks and everything, that's very valuable, but it's later down the line, like Series B+.
Thank you. Henrietta.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, to the entrepreneurs and to the investors listening, that for climate tech companies, there are lots of other forms of capital than just equity capital. So really early on, start learning about project financing, about debt and other methods, how you can actually finance the expensive hardware and facilities or different kinds of structures that I'm sure Cecilia has a lot more experience in. But there are other forms of capital out there for climate companies, and it means that you can have the possibility of actually funding your own company through VC, and then having some of these projects funded together with infrastructure investors, project developers, debt, different kinds of mediums of capital. And in that way, you can grow faster and not have to give up so much of your company, and you don't have to think about raising hundreds of millions in VC funding. Good, there are some companies that do that. Maybe that's not the one strategy that you can or want to pursue. And so there's a lot of very established routes for funding that nobody told me about until last year. I just got so upset with this whole market that I started learning everything about it. And so I just want to say that to every beginning entrepreneur out there.
As I have a background with both public funding and working within that sort of sector, and also working with corporate loans for startups, so I can be the first one to say, like, there's a lot of possibilities, and it's usually a mix. The best way to go is to get all of these different fund methods in the various phases. Arman and Cecilia, how you more like other public funding, or is it just strictly VC based so far? Arman, you can start.
Yeah, so we actually got awarded more than $2 million from the EU Green Deal Fund, and that was like a 3% success rate in getting that type of money. So it was quite a process. It like, none of these things are kind of like quote unquote easy. You have to be very focused and determined and know what you're going after and tell a story and make sense for the world. But it is actually really good to mix them together, because we had signaling from the investors we had on board, which probably helped kind of to move us along in the pipeline of the public funding. And so it is good to mix and match, and again, and also kind of read the environment. So now things are a little different. We can now sort of reference a few companies in the marketplace that have had quite good valuations based on, being 2 steps further along. They're getting billion-dollar valuations, and so it all kind of goes hand in hand. But I would just look at all of these funding options, because your objective is to maximize potential, stay alive, and be the company at the right time. It sort of needs to be difficult probably for you to be at the right time at the right place, because by the time the world discovers that nanotechnology, climate, batteries are the thing, then you need too long to start a company. You need to start when the environment's not in your favor almost, and let the environment catch up with you and the vision.
I can just add some stats here as well. So specifically in the Nordics, at the seed stage, roughly 46% of all funding comes from public finance. And I think that that's a huge benefit, because a lot of it is essentially like free money when it comes to equity, and you can scale faster. So that's really attractive to investors. And then the other thing that also is another path that's very big in climate tech is corporate VCs. And then especially they have a lot of domain knowledge, and they can be super helpful as potential clients or partners. However, with corporate VCs, one thing to keep in mind is that when VC investors, pure generalist ones, look at them, there's always this worry like, oh, maybe this company's acquisition target down the line. So it's a question of like balancing those two things together.
I think we've applied for basically every type of funding there is, and we've had some loans with quite attractive terms from government, and also like there's a tax incentive scheme for R&D, SkatteFUNN, in Norway, which we've also received some backing from. So, but very opportunistic in our approach and trying to attract all types of money. We're not going to turn anything down.
Should the climate tech companies have a higher valuation due to the world saving aspects? Like when you're talking about valuation, I mean, there's more to, I mean, it's more than just making money, and you also like saving the world in a way. So is that worth, what should that be worth something more as well? Or how have your thoughts been about that? Keep us all of the money. It's all about the money for you?
No, I think it's actually aligned. If a startup is solving a big problem and they have a positive impact, obviously it's going to be very attractive to investors. And if you're having a negative impact, then most likely people won't want to invest in you. And for example, in our upcoming fund at ByFounders, we are becoming an impact-aware fund. So we even allocated in our fund that we want to have 50% of all investments that are impact positive startups, and the other 50% that does not have any negative impact. So I don't think that there's necessarily like a direct expression on valuation, but it's just the general investor, sentiment and attractiveness. So.
Do you measure it? Do you have a certain like return on investment? Is that one of the do you measure the not only the return for investment, but also like the climate? When you do
at early stage you can do well, I mean, you can measure many different things, but at early stage you want to keep everything simple, not to have too much of a big burden on the entrepreneur. But yes, we do pick particular kind of outcomes, positive outcomes, and we do track them over time to see what impact they're generating for sure. And we have all kinds of other things like ESG scorecards, impact scorecards, diversity and inclusion. It's becoming a must these days. I think a lot of funds that are not doing it now, they will be within a few years for sure.
Stefan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're already starting to see a coming trend of more of the financial capital going into renewables, going away from fossil to the beyond fossil technologies. So I would say yes, climate tech companies should receive a higher valuation in time. Your other question here about the being a climate company, should that be an add-on to the ROI? I would basically say it's a fundamental base. We only invest in climate positive companies, nothing else. So that's a given for us to go in.
I just wanted to add, I think that it also takes care of itself a little bit, because if you have a good business model, if you have something that impacts the world, it ends up being a win-win for the user and the environment and financially. If you can make batteries that last 4 times as long and don't pollute the environment and cost less than the ones on the marketplace, then you kind of have made a business case for how you're going to become simultaneously a billion-dollar company and impact the environment. And so like if you can make all of those things align, then you're a very attractive company both to users and to investors. So and this is the big challenge, is to align all of those points.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think ultimately, I guess investors aren't charitable, or at least while they care about saving the world, it's also about getting return on investment. And then I think the fundamental question sort of becomes, are these higher valuations today a result of a change in the market where there's more attractive exit opportunities, or it's more likely that the company will raise capital later on at a higher valuation? And if that is the case, then those early higher valuations are sort of justified. And maybe we're seeing that now, that there's actually a change in the markets.
Wow. Okay, 1 hour goes by so fast. And it's actually time for us to wrap up. I want to end this with just a quick checkout for all of you, if you have any last comments, and maybe give us a few like future trend forecast. What's in your company for the future? Where are you going next? Armand, I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, we have, you know, we think that the development speed of just how much battery power we need, how much less impact we want to have on the environment, everything's moving so quickly, and we just are no longer able to do it inside the box. And the nanotechnology kind of opens it up widely to just impact products from within and really make a difference to the world. And I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg for what can be done. And we're going to be creating a very different future in the coming years, and we're going to be in the center of that at Nanom. So we're pretty excited, and I'm excited for climate tech, for nanotechnology, for the state of the world improving through these kinds of innovations. I think there's never been a better time to be alive and to be pushing things like this.
Oh, the future is bright for climate tech. Cecilia, where are you going?
I guess we're just in the start of residential solar really becoming big in Europe, and it's growing. We're addressing a market of 2 billion euros today. It's going to double by 2025. So we're going to make sure to capture our part of that growth, go into new markets, and use our platform to drive down the cost to consumers and make it easier for everyone to go solar, basically.
Great. The sun is shining in the Nordics as well. Henrietta, where are you going? Henrietta, did we lose you maybe? Okay, so and Stefan, you're next. What are your thoughts on this industry?
We just started. As I pointed out here, I think we're the youngest company in the group here, with one year down the line. We made 3 investments in 3 brilliant portfolio companies. Our future is basically the non-fossil energy system based on wind, solar, hydrogen, and climate smart storage. And we will continue to invest. Next time we meet, our portfolio might be double in number of companies, and we're certainly going for it.
That sounds great. Henrietta, I think you're back on.
Yes, sorry about that.
No,
so quickly, our mission is to draw down 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and we're hiring very many people. So if you're listening to this and thinking of joining a seed stage climate startup, please join us. And if you're thinking of starting your own company, you should start today. There's no better time. Just get into it and start today.
That's a great advice. Kipras, you're going to be our last comment in this subject.
Sure. And Biofounders are about to launch a new fund, 100 to 120 million euros, and we will be inking about like 40 new investments, a lot of them in climate tech. So if you're working on something exciting, then please reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking your time. Thank you, Sesamers, for having us on. You should check out all the great events in the Nordics. Most of us are going digital or semi-digital this year. So you should definitely check it out, even if you're not here physically. I'm going to let you on, Tara, now to end this session. But from the Nordics, we say thank you so much, and good day, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are.
All right, and thank you so much, Elina, our Nordic partners, and all the innovative speakers involved in today's event. You can rewatch the full session on our YouTube and Facebook channels in case you missed any part of it. It was fantastic to learn about the Nordics, Cleantech, fair valuation from all different sides of the ecosystem. Next week, we're traveling to Spain to chat about Valencia, successful startup journeys, and all more curated by Startup Valencia. If not yet registered, you can do so at tour.sesamers.com. Thank you to all the team who makes this possible, and to French Tech for supporting Sesamers on tour. See you all next week.